We have had some weird experiences with this, and it's followed our family for whatever reason.
When something like this starts to happen, you're going to hone in on it and you're going to pay attention. And it sounds like that's what happened. And it seems like, you kind of had that feeling this is something that's totally different. And this is something that is not the same thing that we've experienced before.
Right, and we never saw anything actually rise up or move before. What we saw before was on the ground. This was actually something that was just the way it moved, how silent it was, and how big looked, and this light around it. I mean, it was dark. It was like probably 8:30, 9 o'clock in September, and it was just amazing. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we were not a novice to this thing, but this was the first time that we actually saw something totally together in the same car at the same time. And we were just like, and my mother, by the way, she did actually see something in 1954 in Moosehead Lake in Maine, which is why our case is actually on. A lot of times it's referenced as a 1954 incident because that's the first time my mother actually really saw something. So we have had some weird experiences with this, and it's followed our family for whatever reason. And I don't want to speculate. A lot of people tell me yeah.
I was just going to ask you that question. If you think that there is a reason, is it just so much that you've had one experience and that leads to being more perceptive of others, or do you think there's a reason that you have been kind of chosen to see these things on multiple occasions?
That's a really good question. There's so many variables. There's so many things that I would say, okay, yes, this doesn't add up or this makes sense. And to give you an example, I don't know how much truth there is to the Rh negative factor, but 9 of us in our family are Rh negative. That is a high number. That is odd. I'm O negative. My son is A negative. My ex-wife was AB negative. I married my wife was obviously I married someone with the O negative gene. My brother, the same thing. So his kids are all Rh negative, and my mother. My dad was O negative. That's where I got it from. So there's a lot of family members that are O negative. And do I think that there's a connection to that personally? Yes, I do. But can I prove it? Of course not.
Right.
But I do think that the O negative blood group was the initial blood of man. I really do believe that. And my temperature, my body temperature runs at 97.1. It doesn't run at the normal rate of other people. So if I go into the doctor and I'm like 99.1, I have a 2-point temperature, but I can't get any antibiotics for anything because, oh no, that's just no, that is a 2-point temperature to me, and I have to sell that all the time, and they don't buy it. But you would think doctors would know that. But anyway, so there are some strange things connected to our family. My brother, my brother's children, my son have a lot of insight. There are some things that are different in our family. We've always been very different. Going back as kids, I never, going outside and throwing a frisbee around and doing normal things bored me. I was always a thinker. I was always forward thinking. I always felt like I was different. Sometimes I felt like I didn't even belong in my own body. You know what I mean? There was things that I've always been fascinated with certain subjects and space and wanting to know what, why us and why did this happen? And that's how I ended up getting a camera. The first time I ever bought a camera was because I said I didn't buy the first one. It was a gift. But I mean, I've always had a camera since this happened because I said to myself and my family too, if this ever happens again, I want to get a picture of it. And that's ended up being my career over time. But yeah, so there are some quirky things and still today, I mean, we have odd things in our home. Sometimes I'll see like a smudge, or I'll see something that is peculiar to others, but to me, I get so used to it in the house even, or I hear footsteps, or I'll be in the basement and I'll hear someone walking across the kitchen floor, and I run upstairs thinking my son's home and there's nobody here. And my girlfriend was over one night. We're hanging out up in the bedroom, and she was like on top of the covers, she wasn't dressed or anything. So we heard footsteps clear as a bell coming up the steps of my house. And we ran out to the door to say, hey, listen, we're going to shut the door. We'll be out in a minute. And no one was there. And when Yvonne Smith was at my house and Lori Wagner and other people have been here, they've kind of had some odd feelings too about things. And so it's not like our house, it's us. There is something connected to us.
It sounds to me like, the very definition of, you hear the phrases, not so much anymore, but it was a big thing a few years ago to hear about indigo children and crystal children. It sounds
Yeah.
like, you might be of that group, of that delineation of mankind.
Well, to give you an idea, my son, he was fifth grade. He beat an unbeaten chess pro. I think Matt's met my son, and then there are times where he just. I'll give you an example. He was at his girlfriend's about 2 years ago, and called me in the middle of the night, and it's like, Dad, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Check the house, check the house. He was in a panic, and usually when he says something like that, I'm going to follow his lead on it because I know how he is about this stuff, and he's usually 100. He's almost always right. And so I went down the basement, checked the windows, the sliders, the whole bit, and assured him I'm fine. I'm okay. I put the floodlights on outside, whatever. And he was so shaken by it, he had to come back to the house. So this was about a 45-minute drive for him. So as he's coming down North Shore, which is where I live, he makes the corner bend to get onto right where my house is on a corner, comes around the corner, and sure enough, there's an SUV there flipped upside down, well, on its side, and there's a woman hanging out of the sunroof, and dead. And so he felt that before it even happened, because when he got there, the paramedics and the ambulances and so on, they weren't even there yet. So this is the kind of thing he has been pretty this is a routine thing. He's been doing things like this and had been this foresight his whole life. So if there was anything positive that came from this, I would say that our children are a little more advanced than we are. I certainly can't, do the things that he can do. And so in a way, whatever happened back in the day was certainly something that in a lot of ways we benefited from. I don't think it was a horrible thing. I think the town of Sheffield and the way they're treating us right now is horrible, but the event itself, of course it's nerve-wracking. You see something different, you experience something that most others will never experience. You can't really share it with anybody, but at the same time, just because you saw something or witnessed something or were involved in something doesn't necessarily mean it was there to frighten you or scare you. Somebody looks in my window at 3 o'clock in the morning is a joke, is going to frighten me, but doesn't mean he meant to do that, right? So it's all on how you look at it. But yeah, as a child, yes, of course it screwed us up. I mean, talking about this in school, getting fights all the time. I was always in fights in school, high school. It was just crazy. But then again, I lived in a very small town, and people were set in their ways, and they still are today. But
you must have. You must have, had some discussions with people after the fact, as you said. It had been mentioned in the restaurant. I can tell you that this show, Spooky South Coast, was pretty much built in a diner.
Yep.
And the people that would come in, the regular customers that would come in, knew what it is that we did, and we suffered those slings and arrows, but we'd also get pulled aside, and we would have people that would tell us, hey, listen, I don't want everybody else to know this, but I've had some experiences I want to share with you. So as people that were coming in were hearing about these stories, did you ever get anybody else that had come over and said, hey, we've seen these things too, or we've had similar experiences?
Oh God, yeah. There even today, people are still talking. This wasn't something that was isolated to us by any stretch of the imagination. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because I don't normally talk about that. This was witnessed by 5 towns. What happened in '69. Earlier, no. And this is another reason that this is what I was telling you earlier is so important, because the first 66 and 67, 68, people coming in a diner. No, at that point, we were like the only ones talking about it. But in '69, so many people saw this thing that they came into the restaurant and they were saying they're sorry to my mother. They were, we apologize for not, believing what happened or what have you. And until then, there was a lot of push and shove. And my mother used to refer to this table of 4 that used to come in, and they would, because of farmland, they would come in and like suspenders and horse manure on them, and they would just clear the place out. I mean, you can't really enjoy an orange juice when you got that sitting next to you. Right. So that's how nasty it got. There were people that would stand out in front of her door and not let people in. But after '69, it all changed. So anyway, let me get back to what happened in '69, because this is like pinnacle.
Sure.
So after we got through the bridge and looked at this thing and watched it, and we were going down this little bit of a dirt road, very like 10 or 15 miles an hour. This thing was actually going faster than us. It was actually moving, I'm going to guess, maybe 25 to 30 miles an hour if I was to put a speed on it. And I'd say it was probably as long as, like 2 mobile homes. It was pretty good size. This was not a small craft. It was a good sized disc or vessel, whatever. It was big, and it was about 2.5 to 3 stories high, and it still had like a little bit of a sheen or glow to it. We couldn't really see it clearly once it got behind the trees because, again, it was a thin line of trees, but you could see the light behind it. And as you drove, it flickered, so you didn't know if it was flickering or was because you were driving, it was, whatever, but there was some flickered lights there. And then we got to an opening in the tree line, and we're actually like an old dried up brook was there because there were like these stones and everything, rounded stones from water at one point. And we pulled off there and we just looked at this thing, and it almost kind of stopped. Like, if I reflecting back and looking at this thing, we were looking, it was moving faster than us. When we got up there, it had already paused and just kind of was just sitting there, and we were like glued to the thing. And I mean, it had enough of a sheen to it that it kind of covered it, I guess. But you could kind of make out what it looked like. It didn't look like an upside down Hershey's Kiss anymore. It was basically a disc again, that shape. And we were looking at it almost from a side, almost directly from its side. I mean, we were further away, but we were looking almost directly at it, not like up under it or what have you. And it couldn't have been more than 60 yards, 80 yards away from us. And all of a sudden, it got really quiet. You couldn't hear birds. You couldn't hear anything. It was just a still. And I call it like a vacuum of silence, because it was just kind of like everything around you just got sucked out. It was just like you were almost in this like sterile, almost a placid feeling, and everything just went quiet.